I'll go ahead and mention, in case you hadn't noticed, we've got Mark Johnson and his crew here videotaping the program today. Those will be posted different programs, different segments, 7 different ones. As we go through the program, they're going to be posted on YouTube. So we'll get that information out to you when those are available, probably in a couple of days. So that's something that we've not done before for this conference, and we'll see how that goes. Just trying to get information out to more people. All right, we inserted Aaron Heilers for a couple of minutes here. Well, more than a couple of minutes, but before we do the bat, we're going to have Aaron describe a little bit about the Blanchard River demonstration project. That group has earned our education award, which it received a little bit later today. But he's going to describe, for your information, a little bit about the Blanchard River network. They've got 4 videos all together, and we're going to see one of those while we stand in line for lunch. So, Aaron, go ahead.
All right. Thanks, Randall. Again, I'm Aaron Heilers, the project manager for the Blanchard River demonstration farms. I know everybody comes from different parts of the state or out of state, but show of hands, how many of you have heard of the demonstration farms network? All right. That's positive. Doug, my counterpart here from NRCS, that's a positive thing that at least the awareness is getting out there. We're going to show a video at lunchtime as you're getting into lunch to talk. It's a promotional video that talks about the demonstration farms in a little more detail. I just want to hit a couple of high points of what we're trying to accomplish with this project. First and foremost, it's a partnership between the Ohio Farm Bureau Federation and the USDA NRCS here in Ohio. And our main purpose is to showcase conservation practices that are going to have a positive impact on water quality, especially in the Western Lake Erie Basin. But we're also trying to take a deep dive into the economics of these practices and making sure that they're feasible for farmers to implement, feasible for them to manage on their operations. So we have 3 demonstration farms up in the Blanchard River watershed, which is the Hancock and Hardin County area of the state. And over the last 4 years, they've opened their farms up to literally thousands of people to walk through their operations and see what they're doing and have a conversation about agriculture in general. And I think it's important to say this, that we know as a project that there are many great farmers in the state of Ohio, many great agricultural organizations like this one, many local agencies that are doing a lot of great work, implementing new practices, having field days, trying to get education out there and to demonstrate conservation. This project is just part of that overall effort to raise the awareness of what agriculture is doing to help deal with the water quality issues that are plaguing our state. But I think our project can be, or is unique in the fact of the 2 partners that we have behind us, Farm Bureau and NRCS. It provides a much bigger platform to be able to get this information out to a broader audience. So we have 2 main goals with the project. One is to increase farmers' confidence in implementing these conservation practices. And the second is to be a trusted resource for the non-farm public, to get information about what agriculture is doing. I've learned one major lesson over the last 4 years of this project, and that is that we as an industry, agriculture does a terrible job of sharing what we're doing with the general public. They have no idea how you run your operations, and they don't know the realities that we face on a day-to-day basis. But they're thirsting for that knowledge. They really are. They don't want to hear it from Farm Bureau. They don't want to hear it from NRCS. They don't want to hear it necessarily from me as the project manager. They want to hear it from you as individual farmers, what you're up against and what you're doing. Unfortunately, they drive through the countryside and they see, nice big shiny equipment. They see maybe stop signs out in front of the livestock barns that tell them to not enter the farm, and they automatically think that farmers are rich or that they're trying to hide something from them. And 2 stories in that regard. A couple years ago, we had the former mayor of Toledo out to the Stabler demonstration farm. Stablers are a large hog operation. Also have about 1,000 acres of corn, beans, and wheat. We took the mayor and her staff through the farms, walked her through the whole operation. They got to go in the hog barn, they got to see the pigs, they got to see the edge of field monitoring equipment and talk about that. They got to see the manure application equipment and see how that's applied. We showed them soil maps, and we showed how we make prescriptions based off those soil maps. And at the end of that 3-hour conversation, we asked them what they learned that day. And they said they had no idea how sophisticated agriculture is. Soil maps, VRT, GPS technology, the things that we take for granted on a daily basis. The public paint with a broad brush. A lot of the public thinks that we back the manure tanker up to the ditch and let it go. The second story was just a few months ago. We had a Toledo citizens group, the people behind the Libor initiative up around Toledo, where they can sue people on behalf of the lake. We had some of those members out to the Stabler operation again. These are the guys that you see on TV, in the newspaper, holding signs, demonizing agriculture. We spent 5 hours with that group. And again, walking through the farm, but more importantly, listening to them, having conversations, hearing their concerns. And at the end of the day, they told us that they needed to go home and think about what they had seen that day, because it was so different from what they had been told by members of their group and what they had been telling people. And so I'm telling you these stories not to make excuses that agriculture can't do better, that we're perfect. We all know that we can do things better. That's why we're here today, is to learn and to improve our operations. But I also think we have an opportunity to stop being the punching bag for the public and to let them in and prove that we are willing to be a part of the solution in these water quality challenges. So, as I mentioned, we have 3 demonstration farms. They've welcomed thousands of people to their operations, done countless interviews, profiles of their farm, but they are not unique in what they're doing out in the field with the practices. They're unique because they allow so much access to their operation. And that's helping us accomplish one of those goals, which is reaching the general public. But the other goal is to instill confidence in farmers to do these practices. And to do this, we're looking to help to broaden our scope of the project and to showcase more farmers than just the 3 that we currently have in the practices that those farmers are implementing. So I'm putting the ask out there, if you are interested on your operation and you feel like you've solve the Rubik's Cube of a certain practice, and I know that's probably, you never solve everything, but if you feel you're comfortable sharing that information to a much broader audience, we're not asking to bring thousands of people to your farm this time. We're asking to be able to capture that information and take it out to thousands of people off the farm and help to increase farmers' confidence. So thank you again for the opportunity to be with you today. We have a website, BlanchardDemoFarms.org, that we have a lot of videos, one of which you will see, a lot of other resources. If you're interested in bringing a group up, we do tours all the time. Whether it's a farm group or a non-farm group, let me know. Or if you'd like me to come speak at an organization in whatever part of the state that you're in, please let me know. I do have brochures over on the table over here. Out here. A nice brochure that talks about the farms and the practices, has our website on the back, and you can get a hold of me that way or through Randall with the No-Till Council. So thank you again.
All right, thank you, Eric. As I said, as soon as we break for lunch, can't all eat at the same time, get through the line at the same time, so we're going to put one of the fantastic videos that they've put together, and that'll be showing up here. All right, Brett Margraff, come on up here. He's got this panel organized and already has everybody lined up and they know what they're going to be doing. So, Brett Margraff from Seneca.
Okay, thanks, Rand. So we got a small panel that we're going to have. We're going to have Mark back up here. We've asked Aaron to come on back up. Jan Lehman's going to be up here on the panel, and Brant is going to help me sort of peruse the audience as well. So this is your opportunity to get your $40 worth. honestly. So most people, when they come to an event like this, what's going on with this, should come with a question, right? I mean, that's what you're here, try to get one question. So if you can walk away with one of your questions answered here, or at least have a direction of where you want to go with that, then you should have your, say, $10 or $15 meal, and the rest of it is all paid for from getting that question answered. So the first thing I want to do, and Tim's going to help write down some questions for me, I want to engage you guys in the audience. And so I want to ask from you, the audience, what did you come here to learn? And this can be anything. This can be from the most basic to anything that's completely intrinsic and complicated. It doesn't matter. But we've got great people up front. We've got great people in the audience. We've got some chemical reps here, which would be great, because I've already started to get some of the questions from some of the guys in the audience. And the first one that I had has to do with chemical programs. With planting green, and what we're trying to do with that, and being able to throw cover crops right back in behind it a few months later. How about the residual issues? What's working? What doesn't work? Where should we be going with our herbicide programs? So that's the first question. I got that written down. Is it battery or what? Tilting it? Okay. I want to take about 5 or 6 more questions. We've got 25 minutes to do this. So give me a hand. Anybody's got a question? We'll be around. And let's pull you right out of the audience. I know you guys have questions. Great, that's one. Jan, walk on up there.
You talked some about the erosion of, I don't know what you call those gullies. And I know when it rains for 2 days straight, you can't do much. But the cover crops, I don't seem to get as much growth in the fall. You can talk about the spring growth, but what about the erosion and cover crops for fall, or what's your thoughts?
Okay, just hold on that. We're just going to write the questions down, and we're going to come back and answer them all right in order. So, phrase that question one more time.
He was asking about the gullies. What are we doing about gullies? He's not satisfied necessarily with the fall growth that you're getting, and so you still get gully. And what are we doing about that?
Okay.
That's the problem.
Sure. Another question. Let's get another one out of the audience.
Yeah, in Ottawa County up here by Lake Erie, we've got a buffer program now, and I need to know more about putting pollinators on this, since they say pollinators increase soybean yield about 5 bushels to the acre. I don't know much of anything about pollinators, and I don't think anybody else does.
Know about pollinators.
Perfect. All right. That's 2. I want 4 more questions. Don't make me.
There's a lot of organizations out here, agencies that are trying to do what you guys are doing, using cover crops, converting to no-till. Of course, they're all trying to figure out, well, what's the best approach? How do we get those people? We're sitting in a room here of guys that have already, people that have done it or doing it. That represents what, 10% of our crop rate. So how do we get those other folks to make that switch? What's the best method? What's the best approach to get that done?
Bob, that's a question that we wrestle with every time we get together. We've been preaching this for how long? Forever. And you make a little headway and then you go back. So that's a real struggle. I think the economics are eventually going to force it. The margin has become so slim that you can't afford them $1 million tractors. We've got to be able to do it with something else. So if you can pare that iron down, that's going to help. More coming out here.
I got one here. One of the questions was managing nitrogen with cover crops, and how to manage that nitrogen, probably depending on the species of cover put in. That'll be question number 5.
I'm from outside the area, and I'm a little slow learner, but I do have a question. when I get to these no-till meetings, they're talking, are you planting green? Are you planting green? Okay, I didn't know any other way. I always planted green. Where did you people get your information to kill things before you plant?
Valid point. Valid. One more. Who wants one more? Anybody else? Got a burning question here?
I'll get landlord and cover crop.
How to get landlords interested in cover crops. We touched on that a little bit. Somebody back here had one more?
To allow your cover crop to mature, like maybe an accidental situation. But when it goes to seed, how much of the nutrients are you losing that you may have salvaged or scavenged in the process?
Enough, Brett?
That's enough, yep.
Okay.
Okay. So, and if we chew our way through these, and we'll just continue working on for more after that. So let's start with our first one, and that was the chemical programs, and for planting green and in residual issues, and how we can address that or anything that's worked. We'll start with the panel, and like I said, we've got a lot of knowledge out here in the audience. It doesn't have to end right here with these guys. So anybody that wants to jump in and have anything to say about chemical issues or planting green.
I'm still just learning. We've done a little bit of planting green. I have not changed my herbicide coverage, and I'm of the opinion we're probably going to need to. We're struggling to get cover crop stands established, and that may be what the issue is. Some of it may have been just rotten weather. Last year, we didn't get enough cover crop last year to say we got any. So, as far as planting green, Mark says he does not plant green. They're using terminating stuff.
The reason we're not planting green is we haven't progressed enough in our thinking to do that. And it's I want them to, but I haven't convinced them to yet. We struggle with huge root mass that we have to plant through. We're far enough south that, by the time we get our annual rye grass to termination, and then we plant into it, we still are having trouble getting it closed. Now, I think planting green would solve that because it will close easier, but I can't get them to make that move. And one time we did not have trouble getting a good stand. So it's just a matter of then. We call planting green, and we do it a lot in the bottoms because we're planting through weeds because we don't do tillage. We call it planting blind. And we don't like planting blind running fast because we don't know what we're going to hit, a log, a Tahoe, or whatever. And it scares us, to be honest. On all the, even these ephemeral gullies that we deal with, if you don't see them, it's hard to slow down.
Mark, give us, I told where he was from, but give us a little geography. You're 50 miles from the Ohio River, near the Illinois border?
Yes, I live in the southernmost western county that is still in the eastern time zone. If you go any south or west, you're in the central time zone.
So he's down in coal mine country. So
Right.
He's, what, 100 miles south of Route 70 or more?
Probably about 60 miles.
Okay.
And
So that gives you an idea geographically where they are.
Jan, I want to have Jay comment on the planting green and the herbicide.
Our way from back here.
The microphone, I mean, we'll try anyway. So, our standpoint, planting and assistant, right? So, we on the Brand Farm probably have anybody here that's planted cover crops, all of the same trail from starting.
with killing everything as early as you can get out in the field, so it's nice and brown, because you're used to planting it brown, right? So that's the normal for crop management, to getting further away. So again, when Dad started planting cover crops in the 70s and 80s, he didn't have a lot of money to buy seed with, and seed was kind of hard to come by. So he planted it where these ephemeral streams were, or where the erosion was worst on the hills, just to stabilize it, because erosion was the issue that he was dealing with at that time. Soil loss was big on his mind. He didn't want soil washing off his farm. So wherever he could put cover crops, or plant a strip of wheat, or hairy vetch, or crimson clover, or red clover, whatever he could find at the local granary to get in there over winter, that's what went out there. Over time, he saw the resiliency of the soil and started planting more acreage to it as it started to pay back based on that. He was planting into the rye, planting soybeans on 30-inch rows into rye way back in the 80s with a 6-row John Deere 7000. So that came and went based on kind of the crop rotation and the field's ability to manage that. So it's kind of a growth thing. And that's what we've been saying, start small, know your fields, and get familiar with the different products. So today we're comfortable, just like Cody and the other cover crop seed vendors will say, the more the better, generally because of the benefits that we see from that standpoint. Start small and learn your management. There's a lot of people, so there's a lot of help that way. Planting green, so we like it. We like to actually plant in the stuff standing and then roll afterwards in regards to planting green, and we think that getting it laid down, especially as mature as we get it, is helpful, so that the seedlings don't struggle for sunlight. Beans are a little stronger than corn from that standpoint, in our opinion. With that, in regards to the use of annual ryegrass, we like to have the option to mechanically terminate with a crop roller if that's possible. But we have used quite a bit of annual ryegrass and like the benefits of that. But termination in June of annual ryegrass is problematic, to say the least. So that's something you do want to plan a little earlier.
So just real quick, share my experience. So I do farm as the demonstration farms manager. So on my operation, I guess maybe I'm a little unique that I'm young enough. Call me a first generation crop farmer, I guess, that I don't have that background knowledge of the way that we're supposed to do it, tillage. I don't have that pool that way. So I've been coming to these meetings and kind of my passion for it that way. So I started off I always say that I'm just kind of naive. I'm going to do it because I want to do it. And now that I'm getting into it, year 7, I have not backed off my herbicide rates yet, but as I'm looking at taking over more ground with my in-laws operation and having to sharpen the pencil a little bit more, I'm looking at ways to be able to pull costs back. And I think herbicide is probably one of them. I've got water hemp issues and had mariscale issues because of other crops that I grow. I grow wine grapes as well, so I couldn't use certain chemicals that I had issues with. So I will get there, and it will be economics that are going to drive there.
Any comments from the audience? Anything they'd like to share? Anything that they do that they think is, really kind of working for you? Or something that we haven't heard? That's what we want.
One thing a lot of guys want to growl about is that Dad's resistant to doing that. And we want to do that, and Dad doesn't want it. And I probably had an advantage there. My dad died when I was a senior in high school. So I didn't have anybody saying you can't do that. You had to learn one way or I had an older brother that I worked with. But we've been and my dad was progressive thicker in his day. But that overcomes one obstacle that we sometimes have. Yeah.
If you're plant green, like rye, like plant over rye, it's different career.
I have a parents planting in 4-foot rye, and it's different than knee-high rye. And if you have a delta force on your corn planter, it'll tell you it's different, quite a bit different. It takes all the down pressure you can muster, plus you leave your fertilizer tanks half full, just get the seed in the ground. And if you're only knee-high or waist-high, not waist-high, but knee-high rye, doesn't take near the down pressure. So the root mass is really a hurdle you gotta be aware of.
Well, I think that comes to moisture management, is what you're saying. It's probably a lot drier by the time it gets that big, and then, so that causes that too. Go ahead.
Yeah, for those of you who are wondering about chemicals and cover crops, some of the extension programs across the United States have done a wonderful job of getting out there and checking what will burn down a grass, what will burn down a brassica, what will burn down some of your legumes. Close by, we've got Penn State and Charlie White. They developed an interseeder. So they had a vested interest in knowing what chemicals were going to bite them in the butt. University of Missouri is the same way. And you can get online and pull up a lot of information for those same questions. And even up there, going across into the state that we don't like to go into very often, Michigan State has got a tremendous amount of information on some of these things too, especially for those guys who deal a little bit with some more of the sandier and loamier soils.
Go ahead, Brett.
Okay, we got a few more to get to, but I guess my one comment on that would be just, they're not obstacles. A lot of times it's opportunities and we just don't know it. You know, taking a fall rye, you know, once it gets germinated, the simple solutions are 2,4-D dicamba out there in the fall. You can eliminate a lot of troublesome broadleaves at that time. Looking outside the box a little bit in the spring, you know, you got a multi-species cover crop and you want to control some things, you can do some things like taking the grasses out of that and leaving broadleaves if you're going to corn, you know, because the grass can be troublesome at times. And if that's the case for you, then take it out with a grass herbicide and leave broadleaves. Again, it's just looking at it as opportunities, I think. We'll move on. Next question we had the gullies, but it sounded more like it was about the establishment of cover crops in the fall and the challenges associated with that. You want to take it?
Yeah, I'll take it. One of the things that we now is being forced in our area is there's a USDA publication or NRC publication that talks specifically about ephemeral gullies. And so what we see is the tillage people are now going out and drilling these, and sometimes double drilling. And if it is on a fairly steep slope, and if there's been tillage done, you probably need to double seed it. As far as trying to get it done earlier would be important, but you know, it's most important to get your crop harvested and get out there as soon as you can. It's at least try to seed those and slow that washing up. Our experience is the longer you go, the less they become a problem, except for your wash ones. All the ones that are minor, if we're getting that cover crop out there over a long period of time, those decrease. It's just those 1 year events that we get an extremely lot of rain and create problems that sometimes Mother Nature's in control or not, and we just gotta try again next year.
So what's that telling us? We're getting water to go in instead of run off, is what we're trying to accomplish there, so that you don't have the water and you don't have those ephemeral gullies. And I haven't got there yet, but we're still trying to get there. So Brett, another question?
Sure. I just asked Dwight if he'd comment a little bit about the establishment of fall cover crops.
Yeah, one of the things I would say is that we like to interseed the cover crop into the standing crop to get as much fall growth as we can, because then you get the root mass to hold your soils, you get the plants big enough on top, they'll slow the water up and hold the residue. I heard somebody say today that they're small, when they plant late, the rye's small, but it comes on in the spring. And one of the biggest times that you have of capturing nutrients is right when your bean and corn crop starts dying. That's when you have the most available nutrients, and over winter you start losing them. So the bigger your cover crop is at that time, the more nutrients you're also going to harvest. Also, it relieves your workload tremendously because your cover crop is in and growing before you start harvesting.
So those are just a few pointers that I would make about the benefit of getting your cover crop seeded as early in the fall as you can. And typically that will be about the time when you first notice your bean leaves just start turning yellow. And then it typically would be the time to interseed into your beans, and it's normally the same time for your corn if you're going to interseed into corn.
Comment on your seeding rate for rye, because I think you run a little higher than most.
Yes, I run a fairly high level compared to most. We like to, now there's different rates for different applications. So if we're interseeding into a standing crop and we're surface seeding into that standing crop, I like to see cereal rye at about 2 bushels the acre, because you will have some loss from just being on the surface. The longer you no-till and the more soil structure you get, you can cut that back some. The guys that are first starting that have crusting issues, they're the ones that really need the heavier rates as they're getting the system in place. But I want to have a full stand of plants out there to capture the sunlight, to capture the nutrients, to produce my organic matter, to hold my soil. There's a whole list of reasons for when you do this. There's a whole list of reasons you want to put together for doing it. I would add one more thing here real quick. I would suggest if you're just getting started, or even if you've been doing it a few years, get with your cover crop seed dealer, an experienced one. There's some out there that are just in the market. Get with somebody that's been doing it on their own farm, like us or the Brants or Cody, and have done it a long time, and then work with them, because they can eliminate a lot of the risk, and that's what we try to do, is eliminate the risk. Eliminate the mistakes that I made. So that's something I would say, is work with somebody very closely.
So what I'm hearing is, much like the cash crop, we got to prioritize the seeding of the cover crop. It's got to be done earlier the better in most cases, whether that means broadcast aerial seeding or whether that means shortening up the cash crop maturities in order to prioritize it. So let's, any other comments from the audience? Okay, let's move on to the pollinators. The question about pollinators and their benefits. Jim Horman, I think, would like to comment on that and make a few.
Yeah, if you're looking at pollinators, there's, excuse me, I'm a little hoarse. I did a workshop the other day and I had to speak for 6 hours, so excuse me about that. But probably your best ones are your legumes. You've got your crimson clover, that's the one that'll bloom the earliest. Then you get into sweet clover, your red clovers, you got your vetches. The other ones, if you're going for summer ones, you got your buckwheat and your sunflower. Sunflower really good, very deep rooted, and they'll give you a lot of pollination late in the season. Why do you want to have pollination throughout? Because of beneficial insects. One stage out of their life cycle, they got to have pollen. And so if you can get some pollen out there, you'll find that you'll have more beneficial insects and you'll have a lot less insect problems. Okay? Now, what are some natural things that you can maybe help with? You got your henbit and your dandelion in the early spring. They're one of the first pollinators that are out there. So you got to be careful when you spray them. When the bees are out, you always got to be aware of that. If you got any beehives close by, be careful when you're spraying those types of things. Then later in the fall, you got goldenrod and Queen Anne's lace. Those are also really good pollinators. So if you've got areas around that field, those can be used, okay? How big do your areas have to be for the natural? You need at least 30 feet. So if you're looking at putting an area where you want to have a permanent cover in an area, put some prairie grasses or something like that, it should be at least 30 feet wide because the sprays will come in. You gotta have a big enough area. I'm going to try to answer one more question, a totally different question because it came up earlier. This potassium thing, okay? I didn't hear an answer to that. Steve Coleman brought it up at CTC last year, said, hey, we have a problem. He says, we applied fertilizer. Well, first of all, we soil tested and we got a level of soil test that's here. Then we went and applied potassium fertilizer. Now, if you applied potassium fertilizer, what would you expect? Soil test should go up, right? It went down. And he says, we can't figure out what's going on. Well, I just happened to see this in a geology textbook. Under saturated soil conditions, in the last 3 years we've had saturated soil conditions, what happens? Your clay lattices open up, potassium is a small ion, and when it gets caught in there, it'll seal off, and it's not plant available. How do you make it plant available? You gotta have the biology, okay? So if you're using these vertical till tools, and that's what he did, he used a vertical till tool, and it's a little wet out there, you're gonna smear it, you're gonna have standing water, that soil's gonna open up, potassium's gonna get caught in there, and it's not gonna be plant available. So, it's gonna take some time to make that available. It's still there, just gotta make it plant available. Cover crop roots will help, any cover crop will, and here's the other thing, something that we kind of alluded to. When you start using cover crops, you better start, at some point, you're gonna probably have to start cutting back on your fertilizer, or otherwise we're gonna have water quality problems. We're finding out, we're getting hit on the head, we're saying we can't use cover crops because we have a higher concentration of phosphorus available in our soils. Well, that's a double-edged sword. If you got too much of it and it washes away, then you got a problem. But if we're making it more available, guess what? You don't have to put as much on, that's money in your pocket. So I think what we need to do is use the positive side of that, use the cover crops, keep them there, keep them recycling, and don't kill them too early. If you're gonna kill them early, they're gonna come available, then those spring rains are gonna wash them away. So this planting green is a solution to a lot of our water quality problems.
Any other comments on the pollinators? Yep, one more.
One last thing. There's a group called the Xerces Society, and pollinators and pollinator habitats is their thing. They're West Coast, but they've got plenty of stuff that's applicable back here in the Midwest.
Okay, let's go to the landlord issue. And I know Mark talked a little bit about it with some contracts. Maybe if he wants to talk any more, or anyone else, unique situations with the landlords and getting buy-in for using cover crop.
Probably the best thing to get them to buy in is we've got to make the effort to get them out to these field days and actually take them, load them up in the gator, take a shovel, take them out and show them what you're doing to the soil health and the soil health structure. And then on the way back, go in your neighbor's field at work and take a shovel and say, this is what they're destroying. And that takes a huge effort. And we'll see. It's hard to get them, but a lot of them are just focused on the check and what the coffee shop says the highest price is. And so that's, you gotta build a rapport with your landowners and try to get them not to go to the coffee shop.
So do you think that any of the pollinator plots has anything to do with building some of that rapport? I mean, those kind of establishments, is that good or bad?
Well, I think it's good. I think it's absolutely good. One thing we've done, I had a daughter come back and join our operation, and her husband is here with me today. We've tried to develop a 3 or 4 times a year newsletter, and picture heavy, and try to communicate with those folks and show them, you know, here's what's going on, here's a dead zone in the Gulf. Most of mine happens to be in the Gulf watershed. I do farm a little bit in Lake Erie. But we have the same problem there. You hear all this about Lake Erie, but it's coming on the Ohio River boys, I'm telling you. We better get our act together because we're going to have heinous legislation if we don't. So what they said earlier about having to tell our story, we got to tell our story. There's a lot of people doing a lot of things right, but nobody knows it. And so they see the bad actors, and that's what they pay attention to. But the landlord newsletter has been a real help. I get a lot of really positive comments back from it. They really like it because it's, you know, these are people that maybe were farmers, maybe weren't, and now we're down in the 2nd and 3rd generations down, and they become a lot more concerned about just the check. So I think they're willing to buy in, but you gotta show. So.
Just real quick on that. So the number, the stat in the Western Basin at least, and I think it's consistent across the state, is 50% of the acres are absentee landowners blanket on the term here. 50% is owned by the farmer, 50% by the non-farmer. And so the non-farm public that is hammering on agriculture that we've got to do something, why don't farmers do something? When you tell them that stat, they go, oh, we didn't know that. I guess that makes sense. So again, it's just another talking point of that farmers don't make all the decisions necessarily on all those acres. So it's something that's very important.
I'll make this too. You know, in addition to what we may face in terms of regulatory adjustment and forcing us to consider change, consumer demand is also driving that. And as was just mentioned by Eric, a lot of our landowners today are absentee, but they're consumers, right? And they're demanding healthier foods, healthier soils will contribute to that.
It's called civic license. You know, the public has to give you permission to do what you do.
Civic license, is that what you
I
said?
believe civic license is the term that they use.
About 2 minutes. Okay, we got one more, time for at least one more, if we can squeeze a couple more in. Let's go with nitrogen management and the cover crops. And that could be nitrogen management, chip fall, or nitrogen management using the cover crop itself, you know, in trying to scatter or to.
What did you go to when you put in?
Well, when we put in hydrous, we went to sidedress and nitrogen with 32% urea. We have not attempted to, we've tried lagoons and we've just, I think we're too early in the cycle to really, we really need to be doing it. I just can't get our guys to do the lagoons and be patient enough in the spring not to terminate them. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. If they're going to use these lagoons, then they need to not terminate them, only terminate the grass and let the lagoons grow. We have did it occasionally. We just don't do it enough. We spread a lot of turkey litter on those farms. We do put on less nitrogen. One of the things we're starting to find as our soils are getting healthier, our soybean yields are getting bigger, and so we're having to now start spreading potash. We're starting to spread potash on beans. Typically, we did not spread potash on beans. We only spread potash on our corn and figured there was enough left over. But we're now starting to find that we're having to put potash on to get this 80, 90 bushel yield on soybeans. And we are obtaining those yields now. And I didn't think we would ever get there, but they're doing it.
I want to add to the nitrogen management. Manure has been brought up this morning as part of the fertility plan. When you're looking at manure application and cover crops, one of the hardest things to determine the following corn crop is how much N you're going to need to be side dressing with. There's some soil tests available. One of the downfalls of using what is commonly known as the pre-side dress test is only measuring the amount of nitrate that's available and the amount of ammonia. It does not measure how much organic nitrogen will be converted. So part of a soil health test, there is a portion in there where they do an incubated test and you can figure out how much organic N can be expected through that growing season. So it becomes something to look at as far as your nitrogen management program. And I work as a consultant and I've saved my clients lots of money by using that program and following all the way through it. But it is a two-step process. You got to measure how much nitrate and ammonia N is there, and then you got to try to figure out how much estimated organic N is going to be available during the season.
What does seasonality or time of the year have to do with that test, and when is it more likely to give a good number?
The seasonality of the test, we have found pretty good results from the 1st of April all the way through the 1st of June. The number does not change very much because it's measuring the biological aspect of that, and it takes biology to do that conversion there. So that's the reason the test is fairly accurate. Now, what you have to adjust for is realize that the nitrate N that you see on the pre-side dress, that's leachable N. So if you have a lot of rainfall from the time you pull that test until you get around putting your nitrogen on, you gotta make sure you adjust accordingly on that. So you always have a weather factor that you need to throw in there.
Okay, any other last comments there? I think we're running up against the clock now, about 3 after, so we'll wrap it up. I know we didn't get to a lot of the questions. That's good in a way, because we had a lot of interaction, but there's plenty of people here the rest of the afternoon that they may not have all the answers, but they could at least get you some answers to get you steered in the right direction, and probably create even more questions for you. So with that, Randall, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, that was a great discussion, and how about a round of applause for our